It's been 8 years since my world unraveled. That night still plays in my mind like a storm I never saw coming the night my husband, Tom, uncovered the truth about my affair with my boss, David. It wasn't some random accident. Tom had started sensing something was off for a while. The long hours at the office, those abrupt out-of-town work trips, and the growing silence between us all pointed in one direction. But still, nothing could have braced either of us for the moment the truth surfaced. The affair wasn't some romantic escape or a passionate whirlwind. It was a string of terrible decisions, born out of frustration during a low point in our marriage. I'd been working at the company for 5 years. David was charming, confident, and seemed to listen in ways Tom hadn't in a long time. What started off as harmless chats during lunch turned into something far more complicated. I knew it was wrong, but the secrecy fed a rush I mistook for fulfillment. I lied to myself, believing it was just a phase, something I could control. I couldn't have been more wrong. That night, Tom found the email's graphic, undeniable proof of what I'd done. I didn't even try to lie. What would be the point? I remember the way he looked at me, shocked, angry, devastated, and then he left. No yelling, no slamming doors, just silence and absence. 2 entire days passed before I saw him again. When he returned, it was only to gather some things. Then, he left for good. The first few months afterward were a blur. I took time off work. I couldn't bear to be around David or anyone else at that office. Pretending like everything was normal, impossible. Tom filed for divorce almost immediately, and I didn't challenge it. I had destroyed what we had. There was no saving it. I left our home and moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, a place where no one knew my name. That anonymity became a strange comfort. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. We didn't have children, so the paperwork was simple. The emotions weren't. Our families had been intertwined for years, and the fallout tore through more than just the two of us. Some friends cut ties. Others quietly disappeared. The loneliness that followed was suffocating. But I couldn't blame anyone. I'd created this silence. Eventually, I returned to work, but not at David's company. I quit that job. I couldn't take the stares, the whispered gossip, or the pity disguised as concern. I started fresh at a small firm where no one knew anything about my past. A clean slate, but not a clean conscience. I poured myself into work to drown the guilt, but no task was big enough to silence the ache of what I'd lost. In the years that followed, I began trying to rebuild. I started therapy. I needed to understand why I'd sabotaged my marriage, why I'd searched for answers in all the wrong places, why I'd chosen temporary escape over honest conversation. Looking back, the affair wasn't just about David. It was about the emotional distance Tom and I never talked about, the unmet needs I never voiced. Instead of leaning into the discomfort and doing the work, I ran into something that ended up burning everything down. Meanwhile, Tom had moved forward with his life. I heard bits and pieces through mutual friends. About a year after the divorce, he started dating again. Eventually, he met someone named Emily. Everything I learned about her made me realize how different she was from me. Down-to-earth, genuine. They seemed happy. And strangely, I was glad for him. 3 years after the divorce, I saw Tom again. It was at a mutual friend's wedding, the first time we'd been in the same room since that night. We exchanged polite hellos. Nothing more. But when our eyes met, I saw the pain, still lingering, and all my shame came flooding back. I didn't expect forgiveness. I wasn't sure I'd earned it. I just hoped he was healing. Time kept moving. I stayed in therapy, kept showing up to life. I even joined a support group for people affected by infidelity from both sides. Hearing other stories helped. I realized that betrayal cuts both ways. It fractures your sense of self just as much as it wounds those you hurt. It took years, but eventually, I stopped defining myself by that mistake. By the 5th year, something shifted. I'd partnered with a coworker to launch a small business, something I'd always dreamed of, but never dared to do before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was creating something that mattered. It wasn't a substitute for what I'd lost, but it was something new. And that meant everything. Around then, I found out Tom had proposed to Emily. I saw the engagement photos online. I felt a complicated mix of emotions: happiness for him, sorrow for myself. I had destroyed a life that could have been mine, but he was building a future, and that gave me peace. Tom and Emily eventually got married. A year or 2 later, they had their first child. When I heard the news, I mailed them a card, just a simple note of congratulations and good wishes. I didn't expect a response. But he replied. A few weeks later, I received a message from Tom. He thanked me for the card and asked if I'd be open to meeting for coffee. He said it wasn't about rekindling anything, just closure. When we sat down together, it felt like meeting someone I used to know. There was warmth, but also a quiet distance. We talked about our lives, our journeys, what we had learned. Tom told me that the betrayal had broken him at first, but over time, he had realized our marriage had been cracking long before the affair. He admitted he hadn't been as present or attentive as he should have been, that he'd missed the signs, that he'd taken us for granted. It didn't make what I'd done okay, but it helped to hear that he didn't see me as a villain anymore. He told me he had forgiven me not for my sake, but for his own peace of mind. Carrying the pain had only slowed him down. And now, with a new family and a new chapter, he'd let the past go. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, we simply parted with mutual understanding. There was no second chance, no lingering romance, just two people acknowledging what was and what would never be again. Today, my business is thriving far beyond what I ever imagined. I've begun dating again, this time with intention and self-awareness. I no longer chase adrenaline or escape. I search for something steady, kind, and real. The affair was the worst decision I ever made, but the aftermath taught me lessons I never would have learned otherwise. I'm not who I was 8 years ago, and I'm thankful for that. I've learned how to own my flaws, speak my truth, and reach for the life I want, not the one I stumbled into. I can't rewrite the past. That guilt still walks with me, but over time, it feels a little lighter, because in losing everything, I found something far more important: myself.